Selamat Sejahtera I bid to all. Fellow friends, as we all know, we are the future teachers that will educate the future generation. A great education will bring wonders for the leaders of tomorrow. However, teaching is not an easy task. The silhouette, the main ideas of teaching looks easy, but to actually practice teaching itself is a daunting task, especially for novice teachers and trainee teachers like us. Remember our practicum? Not a very good time, is it? Remember the bad experience, the overwhelming feeling when we had to teach for the first time, the feeling of exhaustion when we had to deal with tough and difficult students. Have you ever thought of getting the best teaching skills for yourself as a teacher and the best learning experience for your students? What makes the best and effective lesson delivery, be it in a classroom or online? Ever thought of how to manage your class efficiently? Join us, and together we will explore the best way to achieve effective teaching and learning. We'll be discussing 4 topics today. 1. Effective learning and effective teaching by Beverly, Issabelle and Aiman Hakimi. Topic number 2, best practices by Iman Muhammad Rasid. Number 3, transfer of knowledge by me, Hafidz Bin Abu Khalid. And number 4, classroom management issues by Nurfarahatiqah and Farisa Azwa. Without further ado, let's get to the first topic presented by Beverly, Issabelle. Please enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Beverly, and in this part of the presentation, we will first explore about what is effective teaching. Now, when we talk about teaching, we are obviously referring to teachers. But before we get more into that, let's take a look at the definition of effective teaching. According to Kiriako in 1995, effective teaching refers to the extent to which teacher employed learning outcomes successfully to bring about the intended outcomes for the program of study. In simpler words, it means that it's the teacher's ability to be able to achieve the learning outcomes for maybe in every class in order to bring out the intended outcomes for the whole program of study. Now, from this definition alone, we can deduce that in order to be effective in your teaching, you yourself need to be effective as a teacher. Which brings us to the question, what makes an effective teacher? Let's take a look at this. Number 1, an effective teacher acknowledges the individual differences in the classroom and therefore personalize the teaching. They understand that students develop in different rate, in different pace, not to mention even in the class there will be a range of students' ability and aptitude, and not to mention the different learning styles that we have. For example, we have students who are kinesthetic learners, who are visual learners, who are auditory learners. Now, to take these things into consideration and accommodate to these different needs of students is what makes a teacher effective, rather than just a teacher pitching their teaching in the middle and let students become bored at the back. In relation to that, teachers would definitely construct or adapt and adopt materials that is engaging to the students. We've learned about this, and we all know this, that if a student is able to connect their prior knowledge to the materials given, then they will definitely perform better. Besides, this also shows that you as a teacher genuinely care for the student and want them to perform their personal best in every task that is given. Another way of acknowledging students' differences is by being culturally inclusive. In Malaysia, we don't only have the 5 main races that we know of. In fact, there are a lot more minorities that we might not know of. So it is the teacher's job to learn all this. We know that students learn best when the culture, the ability, the background is being acknowledged by the teacher in the way that they teach, students will feel appreciated, and that is definitely one of the way in which you would make a difference in your classroom. Number 2, effective teachers teach in a way that encourage students to take greater responsibility of their own learning. This includes making sure that students know what the goals of the lesson are, as well as making sure that they understand how the goals will be assessed. Teachers make sure that students are on track to achieve their own success, and also making sure that they are actively involved in evaluating their own learning. The teacher's job is not simply to teach, but to also inculcate values in their teaching in order to develop students in a holistic manner. For example, students can become a responsible human being. They will have integrity, and most importantly, they are independent in taking charge of their own learning. If students are able to learn that, then surely they will be able to achieve greater things in the future. Number 3, this goes without saying, as a teacher, you must know your stuff. You must have mastery of your own teaching content. Only then you'll be able to inspire your students to love learning. But most importantly, it is important for you to master your teaching content in order to help students in their learning process. When you have mastery of your teaching content, you'll be able to determine how a certain concept or why a certain concept is learned this way, and how can you remember this and that, and it'll be easier for you to navigate through that to help your students to understand or to learn better. Number 4, an effective teacher provides a safe and orderly environment to promote better learning for students, and as well as reaching their full potential in the classroom, especially in terms of physically and emotionally. We do not want a classroom to be filled with negativity where students feel scared or belittled by the teacher or even their peers. We do not want them to feel insecure because their friends can answer better and things like that. We do not want that to happen. So it is a teacher's job to make sure that students feel safe and they are not threatened by other students, and especially teachers, because they know their ability, and you as a teacher should be able to tackle that properly. Do not brush them off. That's personally to me is the most important aspect. Do not brush them off. Encourage them to speak more, and making sure that your tone in your language is proper for them. Last but not least, number 5. An effective teacher closely monitors their students' achievement so that they will be able to give proper feedback to the students. Besides that, this will also be able to give you valuable insights on how much impact have you given to the students in your teaching. As a teacher, you need to have the habit of constantly reflecting yourselves. So whenever you monitor your students, monitor their progress, you'll know which students are up to your standards and which students are not up to your standards yet. So when you reflect on the students who are up to your standards now, you are to think about what else can you do to extend the students' achievement. And for the students who are not up to your standard yet, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to modify your teaching so that you will be able to cater to that? And what kind of task can you do so that they'll be able to catch up to some other students? So these are the things that you as a teacher will need to reflect on whenever you monitor and give feedback to the students. It's not just a feedback for your students. It's not just a way of improvement for your students, but for you as a teacher as well. So now, I have a question for you. Do you think you're an effective teacher? If you answered yes, then congratulations. If not, don't worry. Here are some strategies in which you can use to improve your teaching so that it can be effective. One of the things that you can do to increase your teaching efficiency is by incorporating more visuals into your lesson. This can include multimedia-based materials like using PowerPoint or online web tools like Mentimeter or Powtoon or Socrative, depending on what you prefer. This will make dull academic concepts to be more livelier. Besides that, encouraging students to do practical experiences or hands-on activities will make the classroom more livelier, besides improving memory retention. Another thing that you can do is incorporate cooperative learning into the classroom. That is, having students to lead the activity in the classroom. Besides making your job easier, this will definitely encourage students to be more proactive in the task, making them more independent and more reliable in the future. You can also have the higher achiever students to help with the lower achiever students and have them work together to complete a task. So this can serve as a strong motivational support for those who felt like they were lacking at one point as compared to their peers. Another strategy to make your teaching more effective is by incorporating inquiry-based learning into your lesson. I personally believe that you and I both, we need to polish on our questions and make it more thought-provoking for the students. This is consistent with the HOTS questions that is asked in the students' syllabus, in which it inspires students to think. And it is our job to help them to be able to think, because we don't want them to think only one direction. There are a lot of perspectives that we can think of in order to solve a problem, and that is exactly where our role comes in, which is to help them to bridge the gap or to fill in the blanks and help them to make better decisions. Another strategy that you can use is by applying differentiation into your teaching. I'm sure we are all familiar with this. It's in our lesson plan and we are required to fill it out. So differentiation is a technique where you differentiate your teaching by delegating tasks to students according to their ability. So pair this up with cooperative learning. Not only they can finish the task, but it is also a way for them to scaffold their knowledge. Next, we are going to talk about behavior management. So when we talk about behavior, it's not only the students' behavior that we need to pay attention to, but to our own behavior as a teacher as well. So my personal keyword will be response. For example, when you ask a question to a student about your lesson and the answer that he or she gave was totally off, how are you going to respond to that? Or in another side of the classroom where you see a bullying happen during your class right in front of your eyes, how are you going to respond to that? So your response to these variety of behaviors in the classroom will impact not only your lesson in general, but also to the students in terms of their individual values as well. So even for us teachers, there are certain behaviors that we need to learn or relearn or unlearn in order for us to be effective teachers. Teaching is not simply a career, but it's a lifestyle, and you have a lot of students looking at you, and therefore you must remember that you are the role model for them. So the last strategy that I'm going to share with you today in regards for you to be effective in your teaching is by encouraging you to join professional development programs. Now, it is very, very important that you don't reject these courses or programs when the time comes for you, because it does help you to build your skills as well as to be more up to date with the current situation. For example, during my practicum, I only met my mentor during the first week of teaching because she was out for a course about 21st century learning for the school orientation week. So when MCO happens and we are all forced into ODL, she was one of the teachers who is able to manage online learning, online classes, because she just recently joined the class. And even during the ODL period, she organized the crash course for her colleagues and teach them how to navigate through Google Classroom and the extensions related to it. So this is actually a very, very solid example of how courses, professional development courses, can help you to build your skills and to help you to be up to date to the current situation. Also, I believe these courses is an opportunity for you to shift away from that role of a teacher and become a student yourself. You don't always get to be a student after you become a teacher. You don't always have that luxury to sit and listen to other people teach you when you are already a teacher. So I personally think that it is an opportunity for you to feel like a student and to experience being a student again. So it is important that you take this opportunity and be positive about it, have positive attitude towards it, and learn as much as you can and enjoy the process, because in a way it's going to help you to enhance your teaching skills. Teaching and learning comes hand in hand. Now that we've discovered about the 5 characteristics of an effective teacher, as well as 6 strategies in which you can use to be an effective teacher, let's head on to Aiman and listen what he has to say about effective learning. Let's go!
Thank you, Beverly. Hi, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to everyone. My name is Muhamad Aiman Hakimi bin Husin. So, Beverly just now had talked about effective teaching. Now, it's my turn to talk about effective learning. So, what is learning? Learning is a change in the attitude, knowledge, and habits of an individual which occurs as a result of experience gradually. In other words, when a person acquires new knowledge. These are some of the famous figures' definition on learning. We have Skinner, and I quote, said that the change that takes place because of the effects of previous character of an individual is called learning. And we have another famous figure, Robert Wordsworth, said that learning means to learn something new, provided it be a new thing or activity. And that activity should become such a part of his character that he should continue to express that in his future life. Now, we move on to the 3 stages of learning: cognitive stage, associative stage, and autonomous stage. The first one is cognitive stage, which is development of basic movement pattern. During this stage, the learners may make many mistakes and errors. The second stage, associative stage, is a refinement of movement pattern. During this stage, the learner would start to associate skill with verbal cues or visual cues given by the teacher and will help them to react quickly and efficiently. The third and final stage, autonomous stage, is a performance of movement virtually automatic. During this stage, the learner would automatically be able to respond to the cues given by the teacher with few, if any, errors. Now, I am going to talk about design of effective learning in the classroom. The first one is learner-centered environment, which refers to environments that pay careful attention to the knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs that learners bring to the educational settings. Next is knowledge-centered environment, which refers to the need to help students becoming more knowledgeable by learning in ways that lead to understanding and subsequent transfer. Knowledge-centered environments intersect with learner-centered environments when instruction begins with a concern for students' initial preconceptions about the subject matter. It also focuses on the kinds of information and activities that help students develop an understanding of discipline. And the final one is assessment-centered environment. The key principles of assessment are that they should be provided opportunities for feedbacks and revisions, and what is assessed must be congruent with one's learning goals. Now, I'll be moving on to learning styles. So, there are three different types of learning styles. The first one is visual learners, which is learning through seeing. These learners need to be able to see the teacher's body language, think in pictures, and learn best from visual displays, which includes diagrams, textbooks, videos, and they often take detailed notes during their learning process. The second learning style is auditory learners, which they learn through listening. These learners like verbal, lectures, and discussions. Therefore, written information have little meaning unless it is narrative. The third and final learning styles is tactile or kinesthetic learners. They learn through moving, doing, and touching. These learners learn best through hands-on activities and physical exploring. They will find it hard to sit still for long lecture periods. Next, moving on to the strategies of learning. As a learner, we will need to understand our own capabilities and strength regarding our studies. Here are some strategies of learning as a learner you can try. The first one is study strategy. As a learner, you have to find your preferred learning styles. The one that I have talked about before, whether it be visual, auditory, or tactile. You also need to be aware of the strengths and weaknesses of the preferred learning styles. The next strategies relates with time. Do not waste your precious time contemplating. Start doing instead of waiting, because those work that you have will not do it by itself. Start planning your studies, which would help you achieve your goals. The next one is reading strategies. Try to consider speed reading or scanning. Try to understand the text rather than memorize it. Because when you understand, you'll be able to explain it in your own words. The last one, and might be one of the most important one, is seeking help. Never suffer in silence. You'll never know when you need help until you reach the problem. Seek help from your lecturers, teachers, friends, and families, or anyone that you will feel will be able to help you with your learning. Try to have more study groups, as it will help. Studying with a group of friends that always push each other to focus on the studies will help benefit you in achieving your goals. Before I end my presentation, I am going to show and explain a bit about the learning pyramid. According to research, most students only remember about 10% of what they read, but they retain nearly 90% of what they learn through teaching others. So, the learning pyramid suggests that lecture is one of the most ineffective methods for learning and retaining information. However, if you are the auditory type learner, they tend to find lectures more stimulating and educational compared to non-auditory type learners. To conclude my topic, in order for you to have an effective learning, you will need to understand your own learning styles and then look at the learning pyramid and see whether which method of learning suits you most. Thank you. And now, we will proceed with Iman's presentation on best practices of effective teaching and effective learning.
Hi, Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. I'm Iman and we are going to talk more on the next topic, which is the best practices of effective teaching and effective learning. Now that we have heard from Beverly and Aiman about effective teaching and effective learning, what will be the best practices for it? Before we begin, let's take a look at what is the meaning of best practice. The meaning of best practices is the professional procedures that are accepted or prescribed as being correct or most effective. But how do we know what procedures or ways are accepted, correct, or most effective, especially in teaching and learning? In case you haven't noticed, we are in the new norm whereby technology is the main source in education, as more schools, universities are forced to move education to the online platform due to unforeseen pandemic outbreaks. So, In order to know what is the best practices in effective teaching and learning, first we have to know the principles that make teaching and learning effective. According to a journal article by Advice in Oiliki in 2018, the principles of online teaching consist of 4 principles: pedagogical and andragogical principles, technological principles, managerial principles, and social principles. The first principles is pedagogical and andragogical principles. If you all remember, pedagogy refers to teaching children whereby they are dependent on the teacher for knowledge. As for andragogy, it refers to teaching adults that focuses on what adults learn versus what they are being taught, and the goal of andragogy is self-actualization. So, adult learners have control over their learning experiences. These philosophies can be intertwined with each other, either teacher-directed, which is pedagogy, or self-directed andragogy. Some children may learn more in self-directed, while some adults may learn more under teacher-directed concepts. Hence, the first principle is the pedagogical and andragogical principles. So, in this case of pedagogical and andragogical principles, there are 4 things that the instructors need to know. 1. The instructor must first and foremost know the content. He or she must be well versed in the knowledge of the subject matter. 2. The instructor then creates the content. In this case, it doesn't mean that you will not follow the official and planned curriculum. Instead, the instructor's responsibility lies to cater to students' needs accordingly. 3. The instructor also must know the relevant learning theories to online learning. Students use the internet, websites in online learning. Thus, it is related to Vygotsky's theory of social construction, whereby creative thinking and problem solving are associated through collaborative learning. The instructor will need to facilitate, motivate, and guide the learners. 4. And lastly, do the teaching. Online learning can be done in synchronous and/or asynchronous form. I'm sure that almost everyone here that is watching right now has an idea of what is synchronous and asynchronous is. The instructor should know that online preparation is important, communicate clearly and avoid ambiguity, and employ effective writing skills. Next, we have technological principles. We know that online learning is a learning that uses the help of technology and facilities. That is why the instructor must have the capacity and ability to use it and explore new things. There are tons of websites, tools that instructors can use and apply in teaching. One must know what is suitable for a different level of proficiency, when to use it, and why it should be used. Then we have managerial principles. What it means by this is that the instructor focuses on the settings of expectation from the very beginning, stating the rules and regulations like the etiquette, assignments, due dates, and assigning group works. Another thing is these management issues also focus on the students. The students must ensure that they attend the classes respectively and mark their attendance honestly and ensure all the assignments are completed on time. The instructor also must ensure that one must be present throughout the experience either cognitively or socially online. Ensure that you're available to be contacted and make yourself present. Lastly, social principles. Instructors should utilize online teaching skills to build interaction between students with different backgrounds. By having a friendly atmosphere, learners will feel that sense of belonging to a group and this will make the learning experience a lot more enjoyable for them. The thing is, there's no right or wrong procedures or best practices in ensuring effective teaching and learning. As long as we understand the principles behind online learning, only then we can see what is good or suitable for the learners. It's a lifelong journey to learn about it, so I hope you learned something from me, a thing or two. Before I end this topic, I would like to share a quote from William Arthur Ward for all of us to ponder. The mediocre teacher tells, the good teacher explains, the superior teacher demonstrates, the great teacher inspires. So, without further ado, let's have Abu next to share with his topic, transfer of knowledge. Thank you for watching my part. Bye!
Hi again. Just now Iman has talked about best practices in ODL. I would like to take you back into the normal classroom settings for a bit. So, let's discover the meaning about transfer of knowledge or knowledge transfer. What is knowledge transfer? Have you heard of it before? Now, let's continue to the meaning of knowledge transfer. In organizational settings, as defined by Pauling and Simpson in 2012, knowledge transfer refers to sharing or disseminating of knowledge, providing inputs to problem solving, or creating new products. For example, the exchange of research information between Petronas and Caltex to produce better petrol to reduce carbon footprint problems. That kind of knowledge transfer is defined for organizational settings, such as in corporate offices and business companies. Our main discussion here is the knowledge transfer in education. Knowledge transfer in education, as defined by Yale University Provost Center for Teaching and Learning, is learning in one context and applying it to another. That is the capacity or ability to apply acquired knowledge and skills in new situations. Now, can we see the difference? The base concept is almost the same. New knowledge gained for problem solving. The difference is, in educational settings, the transfer is regarded as process of learning. For organizational settings, the transfer is circulation of information, ideas, processes, and many more. Based on the Encyclopedia of Knowledge Management by Schwartz in the year 2006, there is another term that is called knowledge sharing. So knowledge sharing created a gray area of confusion between it and knowledge transfer. They basically sound almost similar, right? Do not get confused. In Pauling and Simpson's article, The Three Blurry Terms in Knowledge Management, they address that the terms are blurry in the general context. If dive down deeper, knowledge transfer has different characteristics compared to knowledge sharing. So, how are they different from one another? So, let's start with knowledge sharing first. Knowledge sharing is a subjective based, meaning that the idea of sharing knowledge is not explicitly mentioned. It is also based on space-time concept. The context changes over time and affect the knowledge later. For example, knowledge sharing among teachers. Imagine a situation: teacher A was instructed by the principal to go to teacher B's class and observe what she can learn about managing a classroom. Teacher A then shares her observation to the principal regarding the implementation made by teacher B when managing her classroom. The subjective and space-time context can be seen in the situation. Different teachers might have different aim in the classroom observation, hence the subject-based knowledge gain. The students in other classes might have different behavior from one another, like the difference between the front class and the back class, resembles the space factor. Are we clear about that? Okay, let's have a look again. Different teachers' observation, different knowledge shared to the principal. The knowledge gained is subjective because of that. Different class means different student behavior, so space factor is there. The knowledge that has been shared is bounded by time. So let's say sometime in the future, there are no more problematic students. So the time factors affect the knowledge sharing. The same thing can happen in a classroom. Activities such as sharing sessions, debate, discussion, the nature of the activities where knowledge is being conveyed in a subjective manner that requires students' opinion and the answers are not objective, making this process called knowledge sharing. Now, move on to knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer is objective based, meaning that you're explicitly aware of the target knowledge that needed to be transferred to the receiver. So, knowledge transfer requires specially designed space and designated time for the process to occur. Simply told, a designated teaching period in a specific classroom. For example, in teacher-to-teacher perspectives, professional development courses or LADAP, where the objective of the course is explicitly mentioned. For example, like how to use Google Classroom during the pandemic. The venue is specific for the teachers. For example, school hall or meeting room. Okay, so the LDP LADAP has explicit objective and designated time and days. Now that we have discovered the differences between knowledge transfer and knowledge sharing, let us move on to talk about the negative transfer. So, negative transfer is defined as the misunderstood of information when learning new knowledge. It can happen both ways, teacher error or student's error. To avoid teacher's error, teachers need to be careful not to cause negative transfer during lesson delivery. Hence, the reason why we need to prepare our lesson plan ahead before the class starts. Now, what if the negative transfer happens in the classroom? This is called student error, or in Malay, salah faham. Teachers need to evaluate students' understanding, like by the use of quick scan, a method of asking to those who don't understand, please raise up your hand. If a student raises up their hand showing that they do not understand, that means that negative transfer is apparent. Teachers need to correct the misunderstanding immediately. So what if the recovery action is late? Like the teachers don't have much time to correct the negative transfer during classroom session. Teachers need to focus on fixing the negative transfer in a specially conducted enrichment session after school, for example, with the student, like having a one-on-one session with the student that is affected by negative transfer. To experience the transfer of knowledge, let's have a throwback session when we were in part 6. Okay, when we were learning Shakespeare in Introduction to Shakespeare class. Let us recall the moment back when our lecturer taught us about the play Romeo and Juliet. What do we learn from the play? Do we still remember how the plot goes up until this day? Do we still remember the characters present in the play? Do we fully understand what is the theme of the play? Now, based on the previous questions now, do you think that we had achieved a meaningful learning about the play? Now, imagine right now in part 8, if our lecturer, let's say Dr. Sutaga said he wants to assign us to write our own play, are we able to do so? If your answer is yes, then the transfer of knowledge during part 6 had occurred. The knowledge of how to write a play is now latched in our mind. Before we move on to the next presenter, let's see quickly how to apply knowledge transfer in the classroom. First, we need to be explicit, making sure that our lesson objectives are acknowledged by the students. Next, knowledge transfer is built on previous knowledge. That's why we need to refresh and recall back the previous lesson before we start our new lesson. This also helps students create memory links so that they don't have the memory chunks separated in their heads. Furthermore, we are required to plan activities with deeper meaning. Following to Bloom's taxonomy, the highest point is creating. So plan activities that they can create something with the newly acquired knowledge. Now, do you realize that some of the points that is already in our KSSR lesson plan and PDPC process? Remember when we need to write on the whiteboard the objectives and goals before we start our lesson? We need to clarify the students' previous knowledge in our lesson plan, and it is like continuous. Remember that there is a tier system from easy to hard as we created activities as mentioned in the DSKE. Doesn't matter where we are teaching in a classroom or online distance learning settings, it is all planned out carefully by the Ministry of Education for us teachers to apply proper transfer of knowledge in the classroom. In conclusion, knowledge transfer is a learning process in the classroom and should not be confused with knowledge sharing. Teachers need to avoid negative transfer, and lastly, the transfer of knowledge is already embedded in the Malaysian curriculum. Now, that is the end of my presentation. Let's move on to the next topic, classroom management issues.
Hi, I'm Farisa Azwa, and I'm going to present about classroom management issues that hinder effective teaching. Effective teaching may be the hardest job there is. William Vassar. I'm sure you all experienced a fair share of pain to make sure that students could learn as usual during our practicum last semester. But how many of you can be certain that you taught effectively? Classroom management is one of the most contributing yet challenging issues in a teaching career. In a language learning classroom where foreign language is used as both the medium and the context of the teaching, English teachers may experience unique classroom management challenges. Lindsay and Noonan, 2005. The first factor that causes ineffective teaching in a classroom is unclear instructions. So, if the instructions is too complicated, it can cause students to be clueless on what to do during the lesson. And according to Scrivener, teachers have to aim their instruction to be a level or two below the student's level and pause after giving an instruction so that they could have time to absorb the message. And the solutions to make the instruction are less complicated is to make them shorter and in simpler words. When you give instructions, the point is to make sure your students know what they are expected to do. This can be best accomplished by using simplified language and common instruction giving, which often includes imperatives and short sentences. According to Dove, most of the language we need for organizing the class consists of simple expressions which can be used again and again. Avoid difficult colloquial language, challenging grammatical structures, especially structures that have not been introduced to students, and complex jargon. Next is to use extra-linguistic devices to convey the actions of the task. Extra-linguistic devices, which is gestures, facial expressions, voice, and visuals, facilitate the understanding of your instructions. This could be the extra-linguistic devices you thought about during the preparation stage, or they could be the devices you decide to use as you give your instructions. Next is to demonstrate the activity first. Meaning is made clearer through demonstrations. After you give your instructions, whenever possible, model what you want your students to do. Scrivener suggests perform the activity as a think aloud monologue, whereby you demonstrate the procedure. You can also model the activity with a student. For example, if you are practicing a dialogue, you can ask a pair of students to take on the roles of A and B. For activities that involves group work, you can ask for a group of volunteers to come to the front of the room and demonstrate part of the activity for the whole class. And lastly, speak slowly and enunciate every word to ensure they get the instructions clearly. The next classroom management issues that hinder effective teaching is different learning styles. Well, we all know that students have different styles of learning. Not all teachers can cover all of their students' different learning styles. A study conducted by Naimi, Siraj, Ahmed, and Shakuli suggests that it is crucial for teachers to have knowledge about learners' preferences in their classes to consider in their teaching design. Reid 1987 quotes Kiefer's 1979 a description of learner styles as one of the factors that account for some of the differences in how students learn. Kinsella 1996 describes a learning style as multidimensional. Its elements can be classified into 5 stimulus categories, which is environmental elements, sound, light, temperature, design, physical elements, which is motivation, persistence, responsibility, sociological elements, which is self, partner, team, mentor, and psychological elements, which is global, analytical, impulsive, and reflective. Thus, we can say that learning styles include affective and physiological domains besides the cognitive domain. The solutions to different learning styles is to partner the weak students with smart ones to help. Teachers have to mix multiple ways of teaching in order to suit all students' styles and figure out what combinations of technique work. Last one is being fair and transparent. When discussing inequality in classroom, it's tempting to focus on external factors like socio-economic status or educational tools like rubrics. It is more uncomfortable to tackle a topic like teachers' bias. After all, no one wants to think that they are biased, particularly not people who devote their time, money, and energy to teaching the next generation. However, even the most dedicated and well-meaning teacher hold stereotypes and beliefs that affect their students. Unfortunately, these beliefs can be as harmful as they are inevitable, at least when unexamined. Teachers having favorites is an unavoidable thing during teaching. Teachers will pay attention to students that are engaging actively in discussion or teaching. Slow or passive students are left behind during the lesson. I'm sure we all can relate to this issue, whether during our practical last semester or during our school years. The solution for this issue is to involve them during lesson or discussion so they could be more interested during the lesson. Teachers have to move around during the class while teaching and ask questions regularly towards inactive students so they could be more participative. Praise and encourage passive students so that they will be more motivated to participate in class. And lastly is to include tangible rewards from time to time so that they have more motivation to join the class. Like everybody else, English teachers, due to having stereotypes embedded in their thoughts, may face dangers of committing a self-fulfilling prophecy by unknowingly not treating students fairly, such as by expecting less of students coming from a certain background. As a consequence, students' interest in learning the language may be dampened. Teaching effectively is not an easy job, as there are many obstacles that can be found during the lesson, not only from the teachers themselves, but also from students, environment, and recently, pandemic. What teachers can do is to keep finding ways to connect with students in order to teach and enlighten their world with new knowledge. That's all for my part. Now we move on to the next presenter.
Thank you, Farisa. Hi. Hi, my name is Nurfarahatiqah Binti Saleh, and I'll be presenting on classroom management issues that hinder effective learning. Effective teaching and learning cannot take place in a poorly managed classroom. If students are disorderly and disrespectful and no apparent rules and procedures guide behavior, chaos will become the norm of the classroom. In these situations, both teachers and students will suffer. Teachers will struggle to teach, while the students most likely learn much less than they should. In contrast, well-managed classrooms provide an environment in which teaching and learning can flourish. But a well-managed classroom doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It takes a good deal of effort to create, and the person who is most responsible for creating it is the teacher. However, students have to be together with the teacher and give full cooperation to make an effective learning in the classroom happen. One of the classroom management issues is class size. The larger the class size, the lesser the time each student will get to make individual contributions. So as a teacher, if you like to have drilling sessions, you must realize that each student may get to answer only once. That's not a whole lot of talking time for someone who needs to work on their English communication skills. However, by dividing the class into groups, you'll increase each student's talking time exponentially. But what happens if you have a class with only 4 students? What happens when half of the class is absent and you're left with only a pair of students? The smaller the size of the class, the more it is dependent on the teacher. So the teacher have to try to avoid participating in the discussions and activities and role plays. Instead, encourage them with feedbacks. And as for the students, it is dependent on you, because the class size doesn't matter to your learning situation if you contribute and respond to what the teacher is teaching about in front of the class. So you have to prepare your own answers to what the teacher would probably ask after the session. Or you can jot down any instructions or work that the teacher will give. And also, if you're lost, don't just keep quiet. You just raise up your hands and ask questions immediately so that you are still in the correct path or in the correct line. Family factors also one of the classroom management issues that can cause students to have difficulties in studies. Principals and teachers agree that what is going on at home will impact a student's propensity to learn. Divorce, single parents, poverty, violence, and many other issues are all challenges a student brings to school every day. While some teachers and administrators try to work with children in less than ideal family environments, there's nothing much they can do, especially when parents are often not willing to partner with the schools to provide for the children. As for these children, they can inform the class teacher about any family problems that bother their life and can affect their studies. Students may also seek help from the school counselors. They are more professional in handling the problems that the students face. Next, the issue that hinders effective learning in the classroom management is technology. A student's love of technology also tends to distract him from his schoolwork, according to National Education Association today. when teachers doesn't have the techno-savvy to compete with the devices, by bringing education and technology together, it can be difficult to keep students' interest and attention to properly teach new concepts. Just like the new norms today, students are more attracted to learn by using gadgets, laptops, or their handphones especially. Students are more attracted in learning the subject with the technologies compared to using the textbooks, reference books, workbooks to learn. However, students have to accept the fact that the textbooks are the primary sources for the syllabus. Therefore, they have to be reminded that gadgets, mobile devices are not allowed to be brought to school. Students have to deal with the textbooks, workbooks, and also reference books. Students have to also cope with the school syllabus with the usage of the textbooks. The involvement of the technology can be used outside from the classroom, either at home or also if the teacher uses the LCD and the laptop in the classroom. That's where technology gets involved in the lesson. I agree that technology needs to come into the classroom to keep up with the learning demands of the 21st century. However, this technology in education is not fully implemented in the schools today. Therefore, teachers have to keep being creative and innovative to deal with the students which are more attracted and interested in learning with the gadgets. Students, however, have to deal with the situation where not all schools are fully allowed the students to bring gadgets and also anything that is electronic to school. Classroom management certainly isn't easy, but it's a valuable skill that any teacher can acquire through passions and willingness to improve their educational experience. In any case, remember to stay positive. When you're happy, your students are happy. Same goes to the students. If you wish to have an effective and impactful learning, stay focused and listen to your teacher. That's all for me. Thank you.
Oh, hello again. Hope all of you enjoyed the presentation. If you do, leave a like, and while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe for more content like this. Bye!